evening, y'all. Happy Thursday night as we're doing our Once Upon a Pastime series. If you're wondering what's going on here while we're popping up here, we do these on Thursday nights, most Thursday nights during the off season. And once again, it's the Once Upon a Pastime series. Tonight, we are going to go over the Hall of Fame. There is a lot of folks probably are not familiar with this, but there is a Hall of Fame induction, or voting to induct, I should say. And that is going to take place on Sunday night. I believe they're actually going to release the names on Sunday night. And with that being said, it should be very interesting who gets in. We're going to go over all 8 names. You see them right there on your screen. Let me see if I can get it a little closer to you. Although it'll probably cut some folks off, but that's all right. We'll do it like this. You're going to have Barry Bonds. You're going to have Roger Clemens, Carlos Delgado, Jeff Kent, and then Don Mattingly, Dale Murphy, Gary Sheffield, and Fernando Valenzuela. And those will be the names that will be coming in. We're going to do these somewhat in order because the first 2 that we want to hit off on the jump that I think are 2 of the names that people are really going to be focusing in on because this is the first time that they will have hit the contemporary. And you got to realize this is a very, very hot button issue for most voters, for most fans. It's not whether or not Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens, and we're going to go over the numbers for all these players. It's not whether or not they're good enough, whether or not their numbers were good enough to get into the Hall of Fame. It's do they deserve induction? And that's going to be the big key in tonight's broadcast. Do they deserve induction? And so good to see folks in the chat. I see Daniel and Gary coming in. I'm sure we'll have others come in as we hit this on a Thursday night. We try to get these in and done before football starts so that you football fans don't miss your ball game. Honestly, we're going to be done long before the game starts because I figure we'll be able to go over these pretty quickly. But I do want to lay it out for folks who may or may not be familiar with what's going on in the Hall of Fame and why you've got it's a committee, and I've got the names here. Give me a second. Let me scroll back up to the names. It's a committee made up of 16 voters, and they all get 3 votes. Up to 3 votes. They don't have to cast 3 votes. They could say, hell, none of these guys belong in. But they get up to 3 votes. And it's made up of ex-players, executives, and media. Now, the ex-players that we have in here, Fergie Jenkins, Jim Cott, Juan Marichal, Tony Perez, Ozzie Smith, Alan Trammell, and Robin Yount. There were 6 executives. I think the 2 main names that you would know would be Doug Melvin and Kim Yang. And if you remember Kim, she was fired from Miami. She since has moved on, but at one point she was the general manager for the Miami Marlins. And there's 3 media members, and the 3 media members, the biggest name of the bunch is Jason Stark. Most of y'all will probably be familiar with him. The others, I just kind of skated over because honestly, they aren't big names, but I gave you all the list of the entire players because all of those players are in the Hall of Fame. That's a criteria to vote. They change it up every time. So you don't get the same players, you don't get the same media members, you don't get the same executives. They change it up so that there's more of a chance that someone sneaks in. I would honestly say that because they change it up, you probably narrow some players' chances. But that's neither here nor there. That's the criteria. So Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens are both going to be in this. Now, what the contemporary committee is right now at this point, it's baseball played from the 1980s on, right? So you're talking about making sure that the players and the executives and the media members are folks that were around to see that. And so a lot of these players that I just mentioned off, the Robin Younts, the Trammels, the Ozzie Smiths, et cetera, they're old enough to have played against him. Some of these guys were leaving the game as these guys were coming on, but they were still involved in the game and still watching a lot of the games. So I think they all have merit on there. We can go on and on about which executive should get a chance, which media member should get a chance. But I honestly think at this point what they're doing is they're just kind of spread the wealth and let a variety of people vote in. But that's what we're going to go into tonight. We're going to start this off with Barry Bonds because I think it's one of the more volatile, and Roger Clemens, but we'll start off with Barry. Barry Bonds played 22 seasons with the Pirates and Giants, winning 7 NL MVPs. Now, that's nothing to sneeze at. And 8 Gold Glove awards. You can argue whether or not he deserved a Gold Glove, but regardless, first part of his career, he was a pretty decent defensive left fielder. Never had an arm, but always able to get to the ball. He is the Major League Baseball's all-time home run leader. No, he's not. 755 is the number, and until someone of credit actually breaks that number, to me, it's Hank Aaron. But I'm reading off one of the media releases that they had for Barry Bonds and all these guys. So I'm going to read it to you, but I'm also going to give you my opinion, and I'm not apologizing for it. 762 home runs, set the single-season record with 73. No, he didn't. 2001. I still tell you right now, Aaron Judge is the season's the all-time home run leader. Unless it comes out that he was, dibbling in steroids or something, that's the number, 62. Because everybody else that broke that number did it on PEDs. He led the National League in on-base percentage 10 times and paced the league in batting average twice. I'm not going to debate every single one of the numbers, but I'm just going to lay them out for you. His WAR was 162.2. Doesn't get much better than that. His lifetime batting average, 298. 196 RBI. 2,227 runs. And an OPS of 1051. Okay? Now that's the nuts and the bolts of it. And when you look at this and you realize that Barry Bonds was literally, I don't know what I just said, but it's 1,996 RBI. I think I left out a digit there. I do apologize. But 1,996 RBI. 2,227 runs scored and 1051 OPS. There's no debating the numbers. The numbers are there. It's how they got to the numbers. Now let's go over Roger Clemens real quick. Same thing. Roger Clemens, he pitched 24 seasons for the Red Sox, the Blue Jays, the Yankees, the Astros. He won 7 Cy Young Awards. So you're starting to see a trend here. Clemens was named the 1986 AL MVP and earned All-Star Game berth in 11 different seasons. He was a 2-time world champion, something that Bonds did not do, but I don't think that really matters when it comes to the Hall of Fame. And Clemens led the league in earned run average 7 times and was a 5-time 20-game winner. He had 139 WAR, 4,672 strikeouts, a 3.12 ERA, and a 1.17 WHIP. Gary says, until someone convinces me that he wasn't on the juice. No, he was definitely on the juice. That's never been debated. Roger Clemens and Barry Bonds both did PEDs. They've never even publicly denied it. They just haven't admitted it because they're hoping for some wiggle room. But everybody knows, because from the reports that came out, from everything that comes, I'm gonna show you something real quick. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Let's see if we can find the Barry Bonds picture compared to the, I'm going to go ahead and pull this down real quick. And this is the picture between Barry Bonds. Okay, I found the Roger Clemens one first. Let me go ahead and share this one. That's Roger Clemens from when he was in his prime with the Red Sox till the end when he was with the New York Yankees. Look at that. Like, you never get the side-by-side comparison. But look at that. It's ridiculous. His neck is like twice the size of his waist in the first picture. So that's one example. The other example that I'll show you real quick is the Barry Bonds one. And the Barry Bonds one, see if I can find, I think this is it right here. Look at that. Look at the difference between Barry Bonds in Pittsburgh and Barry Bonds in San Francisco. It's night and day. And it's well known that that's when he hit into the roids, was about the mid-90s when he was out in San Francisco and got involved in all the Balco and all that kind of stuff. And I'm really not, we don't have time to go through all the investigations. There's plenty of documentaries on it. You can do your own research. But I'm telling you right now, the man's guilty. He's guilty as hell. He just doesn't think it matters. Clemens has never admitted that it matters, but it matters. Here is another example, and I couldn't get the side-by-side, but this is another guy who is up for the Hall of Fame. And he is, I'm going to show you a picture of him next to Barry Bonds because they were linked together, and that's Gary Sheffield. And you see how big Gary Sheffield got at the end. Gary Sheffield, when he first came up, was a very wiry guy. Now, look, they're all going to gain weight as they get older. We all do, right? But Gary Sheffield is well known to be in with all the guys that ran all the Balco out there with Bonds. He worked out with Bonds in the off season. It's never been debated. He has skated around it. But him and Clemens and and Bonds, so Sheffield, Clemens, and Bonds, they've never admitted it, but they don't think it matters. They think they should get in because of their numbers. And that's what they always go to. If someone tries to pin them and paint them into a corner, that is the first thing that they do, is they basically try to tell you it's the same old tired argument. Well, you can be on all the steroids you want, but you still got to hit the baseball. All right. I mean, that's fair. But the simple fact of the matter is, when you hit the baseball, as we'll go back to the original photo, when you hit the baseball, when you throw the ball, if you were on steroids, it goes farther, the ball comes at you faster, et cetera, et cetera. So, with all that being said, you can stand there and you can defend all you want about whether or not they should or should not be in the Hall of Fame because you believe that let bygones be bygones, let it go. I still don't think it's the same thing as the Pete Rose, Shoeless Joe thing. It's a difference between getting busted and cheating the game by gambling and getting busted and cheating the entire career. Because when you were in there and you were making all this money and you were hitting these home runs, striking these guys out, the simple fact of the matter is Barry Bonds never gets to 762 without the steroids. He never gets close to it. He's going to deteriorate. Same thing with Clemens. They're going to deteriorate. They're not going to have 7 MVPs. They're going to deteriorate. And the argument that they always come back with is what? Well, they would have been in the Hall of Fame anyways. Then why the hell did you have to take it? And there's no proof that they would have been in the Hall of Fame, because if they would have started to deteriorate without the PEDs, and we're going to go over some guys here in a second, then their numbers are going to jump off a steep cliff. Everyone acts as though without the PEDs, Bonds is still going to hit around 70 home runs in a season. No, he's not. No, he's not. There's injury that can take place, et cetera, et cetera. Now, if you want to argue whether or not they should be allowed to take the PEDs, that's a different argument. But as of right now, you're not allowed to take the PEDs. And I have to say that I would not vote either one of these guys into the Hall of Fame. They cheated the game. And I always go back to guys like John Smoltz, who vehemently are against putting them in the Hall of Fame because they did it the right way. And these guys didn't. They cheated. And I've never heard Smoltz say them by name, but he talks about all the ones that were on the Mitchell report and who have been accused of all the PEDs. He always mentions the fact that we did it the right way. Why the hell should they be honored? Because the fact of the matter is, if you've never been to the National Baseball Hall of Fame, these guys are in there. All their stuff is in there. There is a floor where they have the history of the entire game, and you go up and you start at the very beginning and you go all the way through time, and stuff from Roger Clemens and Barry Bonds are all in there on display. That's not the issue. The issue is, should they be honored along with all the other guys and given their day in the sun to stand up there and give speeches and get their flowers, as they like to say nowadays, and get the applause and the adoration of the fans? I don't think they do. And if their clubs want to put them in their Hall of Fame, I don't have a problem with that. You can do what you want. But the National Baseball Hall of Fame should still mean something. So, like I said, we're not going to argue the fact, because when you heard the numbers that I just rattled off, the other guys we're going to come up against here next, they don't have anywhere near the numbers. And when you look at Gary Sheffield and you look at what he did, he had 509 home runs. His WAR was only 60.5. So someone who was all loaded into the steroids, and probably, let's say, without the steroids, he probably tails off, and we'll say that probably added another 100 home runs to his number. His numbers aren't that impressive. His WAR, because WAR is never, it's never factored in to the fact that they did steroids. But typically WAR is an indicative number of, well, this is how good they were at that time. His WAR at 60.5, that's really middle of the pack. And to put him on a pedestal and say that he deserves the Hall of Fame, it's laughable in my book. Was he a feared hitter in his prime? He absolutely was. But he was taking steroids just as much as Barry Bonds was. The only difference is Bonds started a little earlier and probably had a hell of a lot more talent, if we're being honest. So I'll end that with that. Gary Sheffield, I'm not putting in the Hall of Fame. Barry Bonds, no way in hell am I putting him in the Hall of Fame. Same thing with Roger Clemens. All three of those guys, none of them belong in the Hall of Fame, because what you're doing is you are giving them props and adoration, and you're putting them up for future generations to aspire to. And I don't think that's fair to put Bonds, Clemens, Sheffield, any of them. You know, if we get the Rafael Palmeiros in there, I don't believe there's a couple of guys in the Hall of Fame currently that should have never been put in. But that's because your dopey BBWA writers put them in and they didn't know what the hell they were doing. And I'm looking at you, Mike Piazza. I'm looking at you, Ivan Rodriguez. I'm looking at you, David Ortiz. They've all been proven to have taken steroids at some place or time. Why the hell should they get in and guys like A-Rod aren't in? They did the same damn thing. A-Rod just got busted more publicly because of who he was playing and who he was. So that's my take on that. The next guy up on the list, let me get back over here to the picture so here we go. We're going to Carlos Delgado. Now, Delgado was never accused of any kind of PEDs or anything like that, so get that off the board. The rest of the guys that we're mentioning, none of them are in that number. None of them are on any of those lists. Carlos Delgado, 473 home runs, 11 straight home runs or 25 home runs or more, 17-year career with the Marlins, the Blue Jays, the Mets. He was a 3-time Silver Slugger and was a 2-time All-Star who won the 2006 Roberto Clemente Award. Now, the Roberto Clemente Award is what you do off the field, but I still think that you should probably pay attention to those kinds of things because it does mean that they were great in their community. He finished in the top 10 of MVP voting 4 times. His WAR is just 44.4, but yet he had 473 home runs. His OPS, 929, 1,200 runs scored, 1,500 RBIs, and 280 batting average. I feel like Carlos Delgado is a guy that is going to be on the just under the bar. If he gets in one day, it won't irritate me at all. By the way, that's one of my dogs barking in the background because I believe my wife is about to walk in. But either that or you're about to see me get robbed here front and center. But Carlos Delgado, to me, most of these guys, I have to tell you, I feel like, steroid guys aside, I have a gut feeling when you mention a guy's name and is he a Hall of Famer, and I don't get that from Carlos Delgado. But then you look at his numbers, and granted, he did play in an era that was just on the cusp leaving the steroid era, right? And he is a guy that when you see the 473, I was a little shocked that his number was that high. But then you look at a lot of his other numbers and you understand why the WAR is only 44.4. He started his career in Honest in 1996. He had a couple of seasons before that. He had one in 94 where he played almost the entire 43 games. But realistically, his career started in 1996. And he hit his stride shortly after that. He had home run totals in the late 90s of 44, 41, 39, 42 in 2003. So what he had was about 5 really damn good years. But he was very consistent with the home runs. His OPS was not as consistent. It kind of went up and down. But when it's all said and done, his OPS, and granted it was during that steroid and expansion era, you're talking about a guy that ends up with the lofty home run total, but his OPS is pretty darn high. But when it's all said and done, the rest of his numbers just don't. The problem with Carlos Delgado is that when he starts to fall off, he's playing for teams that aren't really competitive. And so he gets lost in that. He played for Toronto teams in 93 and 94. Yes, they were competitive, but when Toronto started to fade, the bulk of his career was in Toronto in the late 90s, where Toronto was not one of your national or consistent World Series contenders. So he fades off of that. When he signs with the Mets in 06, he's at the end of his career, and he puts up some decent numbers, but I just feel like when you look at his WAR total, it was more of a cumulative, where he had 1 year of 7 and 1 year of almost 6. But the rest of them, if you just look it up and down, it's about a WAR of about a little over 2, just below 3. And I think that's the problem he's going to have on getting in. It would not shock me if he gets in one day. We went over this at the beginning, Brian. They're being announced this weekend, so they're going to be announced Sunday. This is for the contemporary. This is not the normal. The normal vote that takes place in January. We'll do another one of these in January. But this is, when we're doing one of these, it means it's about to drop. So it's going to drop this weekend as they're going to the Major League Baseball winter meetings. Those are taking place in Orlando, and the votes normally come in Sunday night. Sometimes they wait till Monday, but regardless, it's happening this week. So that's why we're going over this. So this is the contemporary meeting vote. And remember, once again, they have to get, of the 16 players or 16 voters, you have to get 75% of the vote. And they can only vote for 3 people apiece. So you've got 8 guys up for the vote, and you can only give up 3, and you're seeing these names. My hope is people like Bonds and Clemens and Sheffield are automatically, get the hell out of here. We're not voting them, right? That there's still people who are guarding the gate that care about the game itself. But outside of that, you've got guys like Delgado, and now we move over to Jeff Kent. These guys were never associated with PEDs, and these guys have an honest right to be on this. Now, if you took the PED guys off, Sheffield, Bonds, Clemens, they would have put 3 others in. So in theory, if you're going to do the right thing and not vote the PED guys in, the steroids guys, if you're not going to vote the steroid guys in, then in theory, I think it increases your chance. But there's going to be a dope out there who wastes one of their votes. There might be 2 or 3 that waste one of their votes to put Bonds and Clemens in. If 12 out of 16 put those Nimrods in, that is a disservice to the game. Now we go to Jeff Kent. Jeff Kent, this is a guy that I think is extremely undervalued. 2000, he wins the NL MVP. He plays 17 seasons with the Blue Jays, the Mets, Indians, but he's more well-known with his years with the Giants, and then, of course, he also played with the Astros and Dodgers. He's a 5-time All-Star. And see, that's another problem that when we go back to Carlos Delgado, as good as you see his numbers, the fact that he was just a 2-time All-Star is a little concerning, because if you're only voted in 2 times in a 17-year career as good enough to be an All-Star, I can't put you in the Hall of Fame. I'm not saying you got to be in there every single year. And sometimes these guys get screwed because of who is in their league. I get that. But you should still make your way onto the All-Star list several times in your career. Guys like Jeff Kent, 5-time All-Star. He won 4 Silver Sluggers. And at second base, 12 seasons with at least 20 home runs in an era where second basemen did not hit home runs. And I know we're going into the steroid era at this time with Jeff Kent. But at the same token, Jeff Kent has never been linked to it. And he and Barry Bonds didn't get along. Now, I don't know if it had anything to do with that, But if Kent was ever involved in any of that, and there's no evidence to show that he was, someone would have thrown him under the bus. So we can go ahead and put that to bed. Jeff Kent, a 55 WAR. So already his WAR is much higher than Carlos Delgado. I just don't even see how you vote Delgado when you only get 3 votes. You can't give one of them to Kent. I mean, excuse me, to Delgado. And I'm going to tell y'all at the end which 3 I would vote in. And any of y'all that want to put them in the chat, we'll read them off. Remember, you only get 3 of the 8 that have been mentioned. And so Jeff Kent finishes with 377 home runs. That doesn't sound like a big number, but he was a second baseman. And second baseman didn't hit home runs until Jeff Kent came along. 1,500 RBI. 1,300 runs. An OPS of 855. Everything screams that Jeff Kent should be in the Hall of Fame, and I don't understand why he didn't get more love. At second base, from 1997 until 2002, a 6-year period, he was absolutely phenomenal. He had WARs of 4 or above. In fact, the year that he won the MVP, he had a 7.2 WAR. He had home run totals at second base, and everybody acted as though he was a bad second baseman defensively. He really wasn't. If you go back and look at the metrics, he was a solid second baseman. He wasn't someone that you would say was an elite defensive second baseman, but he wasn't a handicap at that position. He's not a Gold Glover, but I would present to you someone like an Ozzie Albies who gets to the ball, makes the plays he's supposed to make. But was he an elite defender like an Alomar? No, of course not. But not everybody that goes in the Hall of Fame is elite defensively. But you look at what he did in that time period where most second basemen were hitting somewhere around 10 to 15 home runs. He had 29, 31, 23, 33, 22, 37, 22, and 27 and 29. So as far as the home run totals, he had a 10-year stint. This is the same argument that we make with Andrew Jones. He had a 10-year stint where he was elite at his position. He was as good as, if not the best there was in the game at that time. Now, you don't always get recognized going to the All-Star game, but he did make it to 5 All-Star games. And he hit 351 of his 377 home runs as a second baseman. The most ever at the position in the history of Major League Baseball. That alone should put him into the Hall of Fame. That alone. But the other numbers that I laid out, I think, make a difference. What is here? BA says, I just learned the difference between the Hall of Fame and the Contemporary Hall of Fame. Oh, that's not BA. Who? I don't know who Rich 22 is. But anyways, whoever that is, I thought that was BA's handle. Whatever YouTube has done has made everything goofy, so I don't recognize everybody. But anyways, then why did you say you're 72 years old? I don't get it. Anyways, you may look like you're 72, but I met you recently. You're not 72. Going back into Jeff Kent. So what this is, and maybe I should let off with this, but the contemporary is guys that played from the 1980s on nowadays. Eventually they will move that to the 1990s as we go through. But these are guys who are no longer available to be voted in on your regular Hall of Fame ballot. But you can get in. Usually that's called the Veterans Committee, but this is a branch of the Veterans Committee. And the votes always take place in December. They don't take place every year. I think the next time the Contemporary Committee will rejoin, I believe, is in 3 years, unless they have changed that. And what you'll get probably next year, they basically vote on different pockets of history of the game. So this is the more modern one. And last year when guys got voted in on the Veterans Committee and they were playing in the 1950s, 1960s, so you see what they do. They do that so that all the guys are not competing against each other at once, because they do believe, and rightfully so, that sometimes guys get overlooked. Sometimes they sneak them through, and they never should have been in there. I'm looking at Harold Baines. Harold Baines should have never put in the National Baseball Hall of Fame. I would have never had a problem with Harold Baines being in the Hall of Fame in for the Chicago White Sox, but he never should have been in the Hall of Fame as far as the rest of the National Baseball Hall of Fame. I still don't even understand how he got in, except for the fact when Baines was on that ballot that year, he had a very, very shallow ballot, and this is kind of my point. When you have guys that are on there, guys like steroid guys that know that certain people are just not going to vote for them, it increases your odds because they feel like they should vote for 3 because they only get 3. The Baseball Writers Association, when they vote in January, they get 10. And a lot of times these guys don't use all 10. But when you only get 3, you usually feel like that you should vote for 3, and that's how he snuck in. He barely snuck in. He got 12, but that's all. But that's all we got. So Jeff Kent, I just laid it out. The most home runs for anybody in the history at second baseman in Major League Baseball. 351 were hit at second base, 377 total. That, to me, alone tells me Jeff Kent is a Hall of Famer. All right, the next guy on the board that we see is we're just kind of going by picture, so I don't really have this game planned per se. We've got Fernando Valenzuela. And when he passed away, we did it Once Upon a Pastime, so I won't spend a whole lot of time on this. If you want to go back and look at his numbers and look at the video that we did there, I would encourage you to do that. Fernando Valenzuela is more of a cultural icon because in the late 70s into the early 80s, there was a thing called Fernando Mania where the Mexican Americans in Southern California just adored Fernando Valenzuela. And it continued for the rest of their adulthood. They carried that in. But at that time, that little pocket of about 3 or 4 years, he was one of the best pitchers in the game. He really was, and you can't argue against that. But he just didn't have the staying power, or the people that are going to vote against him or not put a vote in for him is what they're going to say. Remember, 1981, he was the Rookie of the Year and won the Cy Young. Now, that was a strike-shortened year, but albeit, he was the Rookie of the Year. He only has 173 wins, and I think that hurts him quite a bit. The WAR at 41, I think that hurts him quite a bit. And he played with several different teams, so a lot of fan bases would like to see him in because they remember him. Now, he's most remembered as a Dodger, but he played for the Angels. He played for the Orioles. He played for the Phillies, the Padres, the Cardinals. Kind of bounced around, but he stuck it out and was able to put 2,900 innings together, 2,000 strikeouts, a whip of 1.32, an ERA of 3.54. You know what that is to me? That is a career guy who was never a bum. He was a guy that was solid, but to me that's not Hall of Fame worthy. He was a 6-time All-Star, but if you look at the numbers, so we start with 1981, and it ran from 81 to 86. Those were his 6 All-Star seasons. 4 of those, I think, were definitely warranted. 2 of them, 82 and 83, 83 and 84, where his numbers were not that fantastic. He was being voted in by the fans, and they were still in the middle of that Fernando Mania. The main thing on Fernando Mania, it was 81 and 82. That was the crescent of it. But he rode that wave. And he actually came back and had a pretty good season in 86, but he's got too many seasons where he had negative WAR or barely over 1 in his career. In 88, minus 0.1. In 1990, minus 0.1. In 1997, minus 0.5. From 1988 till 1997, he only had 1 year of WAR that was over 2, and that was in 96 with the San Diego Padres, where he went 13-8 and a 3.62 ERA. The rest of it, he was a journeyman. He bounced in and out of the bullpen. But I don't have a problem when they put him in the Dodgers Hall of Fame, because he definitely belongs there. He's a part of their story. He just, to me, falls a little flat when you start talking about the National Baseball Hall of Fame. So that's where I stand on that. And a lot of his numbers are inflated because the one thing that you can't take away from him, he stuck it out and he found a way to keep going out there and playing year after year after year and staying relevant in Major League Baseball. But that doesn't mean that we should put him in the National Baseball Hall of Fame. So there you have that on Fernando Valenzuela. All right, see, who do we have next on the board? We've already gone through Gary Sheffield. There's a picture. I don't know why they have him in a Tigers uniform. I don't even think of him as a Tiger. Think of him when he was the Yankees. Of course, he played for the Braves for a little bit, and when he was with the Marlins. He should probably be in a Marlins cap. And so we'll do Dale last. Don Mattingly would be the next one on the board. Don Mattingly. The best thing that I can tell you about Mattingly and where I would vote for him if I grew up in that era in New York, he was their Dale Murphy. He never won a championship. He only made it to the playoffs one time. That was at the tail end of his career. That was in the 95 year when Griffey walked him off. But he was a consistent player. And the one thing about Mattingly, look, he played all 14 seasons with the Yankees, so he is a New York Yankee. And does he belong in the New York Yankee Hall of Fame? I think so, because even though that was a down time for the Yankees in the 80s into the very early 90s, he was the model of consistency. He won 9 Gold Gloves. That's nothing to sneeze at. And in 1985, he won the AL MVP. He was a 3-time Silver Slugger Award. Now, he was also a manager, and if you want to add that into it, and that's how he gets in the Hall of Fame, I can see the argument for that. Because if you want to combine, but typically you go in as a player or you go in as a manager. But you don't go in as both. He reached the World Series for the first time in his career as a bench coach for the Toronto Blue Jays this year. I'm sure most of y'all remember me bloviating about that during the postseason. And I'm a Don Mattingly fan. I just am. I grew up in that era as a kid, being told that the Yankees were one of the great stories in all of baseball, and we used to spend our summers in New York. So he definitely had an impression on me as a young kid. But you look at his overall numbers, and he was one of the better hitters of the 1980s. And he did get to 6 All-Star games. He is a guy that if this class was a little more shallow, I'd say he'd almost be a shoo-in. Like, he's right there. You could talk me into it, and you could talk me out of it. The question would be, well, who am I taking off my list? And we'll get into that in a second. But he is a guy that got 4 Gold Gloves in his final 4 seasons, giving him 8 total. He is a guy that ended up, if you look at Don Mattingly and you look at his numbers and we go through it chronologically as far as why is he not in the Hall of Fame, right? Well, think about this. And the next guy up on our list was guilty of this too. they were being compared by the time they retired. So you're talking about his final year was 1995. His first year of eligibility, we're talking about the 1999, 2000, right? Well, what was going on at that time period? The steroids, but though nobody was focusing on that because a lot of us just had our head in our sand, a lot of us didn't even dream that they were on steroids. You thought they may be, the little hush, hush, wink, wink, nod, nod, but you didn't know for sure. But their numbers were being compared as they go up for the Hall of Fame. Because remember, he only ends up with 222 lifetime at first base. And I think that's what hurts him the most. When he first came up, he was an outfielder. He was a third baseman. He could have ended up anywhere. But because he ends up at first base, you expect higher offensive totals. Because the history of the game, your first baseman is usually one of your bigger sluggers. But when he gets eligible to be voted in, 1999, 2000, and back then you were on the list a lot longer, but it didn't help him because all these numbers were being accumulated, and the home run total is being looked at as going, dude, this guy's got 222 home runs. Why am I going to vote for him in a few years? I'm going to make Bonds a shoo-in. I'm going to make McGuire a shoo-in. Sammy Sosa. List goes on and on. Gary Sheffield. He played in an era where the home run ball was not that common in the 80s. A guy that went out, so let's take one of his better years. Let's take 1986. We just talked about it. He had 31 home runs. He had a OPS of 967. He had a 7.2 WAR. His batting average was 352. There's a reason why he got the hardware that year, right? Same thing with 1984. He led the league in batting at 343 average. There was a time, and I'm going to say from 1984 to about 1987, so about a 5-year span, maybe you could sprinkle in 88 and 89, where he was one of the dominant first basemen, but he never had the power numbers on the outside of it. So in other words, when he first came up, he didn't get a ton of plate appearances in the first 2 seasons, but he only had a total of 4 home runs in about 100 games that he played. Then you get on the other side of it, and his home run totals really dipped off. So in other words, in 1989, 1990, 91, 94, 95, he did not get double-digit home runs, and that's what's hurt his campaign. He had 14 and 17, respectively, in 92 and 93, and WARs just under 3, which isn't great, but it's still respectable. The problem with his numbers are 90, 91, and 95. That's what's wrong with his numbers at this point. And that's what's going to keep him out if he does not get in, is because he had a very small pocket where he was one of the better hitters in baseball. He's got that in common with our next guy, our final guy, Mr. Dale Murphy. And I grew up as a Dale Murphy fan, so I'm not going to give you the most honest answer on this. He was my favorite player growing up. It's not even close. There was Dale Murphy in baseball for me and Dan Marino in football. Larry Bird in basketball. That in a nutshell was my childhood. Arguing that these guys were the greatest while we were playing sports in the backyard or down at the park or whatnot. He finishes with the WAR of 46.5. I know it's not incredibly astounding. And he gets hurt by the fact, injuries, and I don't want to push it aside. At the very tail end of his career, Don Mattingly had some injuries that really took a toll on him. But Murphy, because of the pounding his body took playing in center field, remember he came up as a catcher, he ended up falling off a cliff. When he fell off a cliff. But let's take the numbers. First of all, in the 1980s, he's the only player in the top 13 in WAR in the 1980s that ends up that has not been put in the Hall of Fame yet. Okay? He's the only one. That, to me, is a huge red flag on as far as why in the hell haven't they voted this guy in, right? I mean, it's kind of comical because if you grew up in that era and you were watching baseball on television, and it doesn't matter if you were living in the South or if you were living in the North, West, Midwest, it doesn't matter. Dale Murphy was a part of your baseball fanhood because he was on every night on the Superstation on TBS. And it doesn't matter where you were, because I can tell you this as a young kid going up the East Coast during summer vacations and whatnot, heading to New York, when we'd stop at hotels, and they all had like this very small package of cable channels. The one cable channel that was always consistent was TBS and the Atlanta Braves, and I would see the commercials in North Carolina, in Virginia, wherever the hell we stopped at as a halfway point from Jacksonville, Florida, up to New York. And so if I'm seeing it, everybody else was seeing it in that area. And it didn't matter where we went. When we went out west one year, we went from Jacksonville all the way out to California and back. And we went with my grandparents in their camper, right? We would stop at or motorhome. It was actually a motorhome. But we would stop at all the different campgrounds, the KOAs and whatnot, and you would hook up the cable, and guess what? TBS was always on there. So when I saw games during my vacations, I didn't think of it then how cool it was that I could follow my team, because I saw them all the time, and if I had to go a week or two without seeing them, it just would have been a thing. It would be like, okay, well, I'll be able to watch the Mets and Yankees in New York, et cetera, et cetera. But it was cool that the fact that whether we went up north or we went out west and back, we stopped at all these campgrounds. And I don't remember one time, I'm sure there was probably one, but I don't remember one time where we couldn't get TBS on any of these motels, hotels, or campgrounds. So Dale Murphy was the 1980s baseball for a lot of us. Dale Murphy won the 82 and 83 MVP back-to-back. Dale Murphy, go over some of his numbers real quick. I just mentioned this, but of the top 13 position players in B Ward during the 1980s, Murphy is the only one not in the Hall of Fame. So he's got a 47.1 B Ward. It's a little different than Ward, but it's pretty much all the same. Their metrics hit different, but regardless, they're comparable if you put side by side, because I've looked at the B WAR, I've looked at the F WAR, and you put them side by side along with just WAR. The short of it is it's ranking the best players, and he was in that mix. And he was ranked top 10. He was ranked 10th in WAR in the 1980s. No one had more total bases during the decade of the 1980s than Dale Murphy. Nobody had more than the 308 home runs, which were second most. So he had the most total bases and the second most home runs. He had 36 home runs in 1982, and 1983 was his other MVP year. He had 36 home runs in both of those seasons. That was a very high number for back then. I remember when it would basically, if there was an internet, it would have broken the internet, when someone would start flirting with 40. You didn't even dream of 50 or 60. So he had 36 in 82, 36 in 83, 36 home runs in 84, and 37 in 85. And there's a very strong argument that he could have won the MVP in 84. I think it really comes down to eventually you're not going to get a three-time MVP very often, and they want to spread the wealth. But you could make the argument that he should have won it in 84. 85, probably not, but his numbers are right there with everybody. Then he had a down year in 1986, but he still ended up with 29 home runs. Now, his batting average dropped quite a bit to 265, which ends up being his lifetime number. But in 1982, looking at the OPSs, in 1982, the MVP year, 885. In 1983, 933, which led the league in OPS. 919 in 84, 927 OPS. And an 824 in 86. Then he bounces back in 87, has a 7.7, and he had 44 home runs. That is another year that, honest engine, if the Braves would have had more wins, because back then they did factor a lot of that into it, but if the Braves would have had more wins, you would have seen Dale Murphy at least get one more MVP in that stretch. 44 home runs, 105 RBI. Hell, that's an impressive number in this age. That's right, Gary. Back-to-back MVPs in 82 and 83. I don't know if you're just joining us. And then in 88 is where he starts to fall off, but still, it still should be known, no one had more total bases in the 1980s than Dale Murphy. That's got to stand for something when we're talking about Hall of Fame. What the hell are we talking about? In a complete decade, and no one had more total bases. It doesn't matter what the total was if you're trying to compare it to this decade, that decade. It's the fact that his peers recognize that Dale Murphy belongs in the Hall of Fame. He was a pretty damn good gloveman as well. I mean, you're talking about a guy that went from behind the plate to center field and really didn't miss much behind that. But we move on from that. During his 18-year career, primarily with the Braves, he did finish a stint at the very end where he was traded to Philadelphia, played there for a couple of years in his final year in 93 where he was trying to get to the 400 home run mark, but I'm telling you, his body had just broken down. He ended up playing in 26 games, only 49 plate appearances, so you can't even count 93 realistically. You can't count 92. 92, he only played in 18 games, so these injuries had taken a toll on him. So the numbers I'm giving you are really from 1980, and I guess to be fair, we'll take it back to 78. From 1978 up until 1991, he did play 53 games with the Philadelphia Phillies in 91. He just didn't have great success because his back had given out. I mean, he was cooked. But he was a 7-time All-Star. He was a 5-time Gold Glove winner, along with 2 back-to-back MVPs, along with the fact that he had the most total bases in all of Major League Baseball in the 1980s. You think about some of the guys that played the 1980s, he was the best, the most. And oh, by the way, he also had a Clementi Award recipient in 1988, which just tells you what he did off the field as well. See if I've missed anything else on this. Murphy led the league in home runs twice, RBIs twice, and slugging percentage twice. He posted 30-30 season in 1983. And I won't go back into all the other numbers that I just gave you. But Dale Murphy, number one with the bullet. And it's not just because he's a Brave. And it's not just because I'm a Braves fan and grew up idolizing him. But it's the simple fact that he was 1980s baseball. And he continues to be a great ambassador of the game. I think that's another thing that you could take into consideration when you're making these votes. I really do, because I don't believe that that's looked upon enough when you talk about, and let's not wait until it's too late. A guy like a Pete Rose, right, where you wait until after they pass him. All right, now we'll put him in. Let's put him in while he can still give the speeches, and the fans who grew up adoring him can go make that trip. It's time for Dale Murphy to be in the Hall of Fame. Now, let me pan this out real quick as we're going to put an end to this here in a second. I'm going to tell you who my 3 Hall of Fame picks are. And I'm going to go ahead and make 3. There's 2 solid in my book. But the third one that I would like to see, just because of kind of what I've laid out and also the fact that he was the American League Dale Murphy, not quite as impressive on the numbers, but I'm not putting Clemens in, I'm not putting Bonds in, and I'm not putting Sheffield in. They don't belong. They really don't belong. They were steroid abusers, and they cheated the game. Fernando Valenzuela and Carlos Delgado, they're just on the outside looking in. And if Jeff Kent and Dale Murphy aren't in this board, I could see me voting for one, but it really would be depending on who the other 2 names you put in there. I'm putting Dale Murphy in number 1 with the bullet. I'm putting Jeff Kent in. It is overdue for both of these guys who were the best at their position during their career. I think a lot of folks don't realize how good Jeff Kent was because he spent so much of his career on the West Coast, so you didn't see it. And he was a little overshadowed by steroid Bonds. But Jeff Kent was the best second baseman, offensive second baseman we had ever seen over his entire career. I still put Ryan Sandberg just a touch above that, growing up in that era. Rhino was the gold standard. But if you look at the actual numbers, it's Kent, right? So you got to put Murphy in. You got to put Jeff Kent in. And so it comes down to, if you gave me a third pick, who am I picking? I'm putting Don Mattingly in. That's who I'm going. I'm going Don Mattingly. And it's really more for the fact that he played in that pressure cooker that was New York with Steinbrenner. He was the ultimate professional. There was a time period in the 80s where he was looked upon as the best player in the American League from year to year. Not in every year, but there were times where you had the arguments as a kid, like, well, who's the best player in the National League? It was always Dale Murphy. There were years where other guys would show up, but if you got to me at the end of the 1980s and said who was the best there was to do it for the entire decade, you wouldn't even blink. That's why it's so hard to believe that he wasn't put in yet. It's very reminiscent of what has happened to Andrew Jones. The fact that they had 10 years of dominant baseball, but because they fell off at the end, I'm sorry, but 10 years in a baseball career is pretty damn impressive when you're one of the elites. So give me Murphy, give me Kent, and give me Mattingly in that order. Fernando, I think he absolutely belongs in his Dodger Hall of Fame as he's there. And Carlos Delgado, he's one of the better Blue Jays to ever do it. One of them gets in eventually, I don't mind, but if they get in over those 3 guys, and usually only get 2, so that's why I'm really pounding the table, give me Murphy, give me Kent. But if you're going to put a third one in there, and I think he's got a decent chance because of the New York media bias, Don Mattingly. See, Charlie says if it was me, it would be Murphy, Kent, and Mattingly too. I don't think if I've missed anybody else's comments on that kind of stuff, I do apologize. Put them in real quick. I think that's going to about wrap it up. Told you we weren't going to do a very long one today. We wanted to. I agree, Charlie. It wasn't just the fact their numbers are dominant, but I enjoyed watching them play. And I'd be lying if I told you I wasn't a Don Mattingly fan growing up as a kid. You knew who Mattingly was, even though the Yankees were never on TV in the South. The one thing I knew about the New York Yankees, because you did not get as many, you got a lot more television, national broadcasts in the 90s, so I was much more familiar with Jeff Kent, Carlos Delgado, Bonds, Clemens, Sheffield. Growing up in the 80s, if you had asked me in 85, I would have assumed Fernando Valenzuela was going to the Hall of Fame. I just think he falls just a tad short. But it wouldn't surprise me if one day, long after we're all gone, that someone puts him in because, dude, this guy Fernando, he was an icon. He was a cultural icon, and that you can't take away from him. But don't sleep on the fact that Dale Murphy was a cultural icon for every baseball fan in the South, and we still love him. Put Murphy in. Kent is overdue, and we can say the same for Mattingly. And that's going to just about wrap it up. We will see you next week unless news breaks. Make sure to hit that bell and know when we're jumping on, because if the Braves make a big move or there's just a huge move that involves in the Braves, we're going to jump on. But other than that, Braves Country Today came on earlier this morning if you missed it. So go ahead and dial that up, and please go ahead and hype these videos. You got to wait about 30 minutes afterwards, but if you can take the chance to hype these videos, it's much appreciated. We'll see you next time, and we will be doing the games Wednesday night. I don't think I've put the card up yet, but I'm going to do all that stuff tomorrow. It's a studio day for me, so we're going to be doing Acuna's Sharks baseball team down in the Venezuelan League, and I think it starts at 5:30. But I might have that. It's either 5:30 or 6 on Wednesday evening the next 2 weeks, and then we go to Tuesdays. Y'all have a great one, and appreciate you stopping in, and go Braves! Put Murphy in. It's ridiculous.
Goodbye, sweetheart. Well, it's time to go. We're back tomorrow with another show. Well, unless we're fired, we'll talk to you then. Goodbye, sweetheart. Goodbye. Goodbye.
Guys and gals, it's time to go. We'll see you on the next show.
Same bat time, same bat channel.
It's closing time, y'all. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. Have a great one. On your way out, please like and subscribe, and don't forget to tip your favorite bartender. We'll see you. I'm Mac Magee, signing off for Braves Country Radio.